The security footage didn't lie. The timestamp read 11:47 p.m., and there he was, James Matthew Crawford, the oil tycoon whose face graced Forbes covers, with his hands wrapped around a homeless man's throat in a dark Houston alley. By morning, the video had gone viral, his empire was crumbling, and the world had already convicted him. But nobody knew what the beggar had whispered in those final choking moments. Nobody knew about the photograph clutched in those dirt-stained fingers. And nobody, not the reporters, not the prosecutors, not even Crawford's own lawyers, could have predicted that the truth would be far more devastating than the crime. The flash of cameras felt like shrapnel against James Crawford's face. He sat rigid in the back of his midnight blue Escalade, watching Houston's skyline blur past tinted windows as his driver, Miguel, navigated through traffic with practiced urgency. The phone in James's hand buzzed incessantly, 43 missed calls in the last 10 minutes. His PR team. His lawyers. His board of directors. All vultures circling a wounded animal. Mr. Crawford, Miguel's voice cut through the leather-scented silence, his Houston accent thick with concern. Should I take the back entrance to Crawford Tower? James didn't answer immediately. His grey eyes, the same shade as the Gulf before a storm, remained fixed on the phone screen, watching his life implode in real time. The video had been shared 2.3 million times. The hashtag #CrawfordChokes was trending worldwide. No, he finally said, his voice like gravel. Front entrance. Miguel's eyes found his in the rearview mirror, wide with disbelief. Sir, there's at least 50 reporters. I said front entrance. 48 hours ago, James Matthew Crawford had been untouchable. At 37, he'd built Crawford Energy from a single fracking operation into a multi-billion-dollar empire that powered half of Texas. He'd survived market crashes, environmental lawsuits, and 3 attempts by competitors to destroy him. He'd learned early that in Texas, you either stood tall or you got trampled. But he'd never been caught on camera choking a beggar in an alley behind Minute Maid Park. The Escalade pulled up to Crawford Tower, a gleaming 40-story monument to excess rising from Houston's downtown core. The crowd erupted. Reporters surged forward like a wave, their microphones thrust out like weapons. James could see their mouths moving, shouting questions he couldn't hear through the bulletproof glass. Murderer. How does it feel to attack the homeless? Crawford, are you going to jail? His phone buzzed again. This time he answered. James, for God's sake, do not make a statement. Patricia Valdez, his head attorney, sounded like she'd been gargling glass. The DA's office is looking for any reason to. I'm not making a statement, Patricia. Then what the hell are you doing going through the front entrance? We discussed this. Back entrance, straight to the boardroom, damage control. I need to see something first. He hung up before she could respond. Miguel opened the door, and the chaos became deafening. James stepped out, his 6'3" frame unfolding with deliberate slowness. He wore what he always wore, dark jeans, a white button-down, and a black Stetson that had belonged to his father. No tie. No pretense. The cameras loved it. The press called it his cowboy billionaire image. Today, they'd call it arrogance. Mr. Crawford, did you kill that man? Is it true you have a history of violence? What do you say to people calling for your arrest? James walked through the crowd like Moses through the Red Sea, his security team forming a human barrier. His face betrayed nothing. Not anger, not fear, not remorse. It was the same expression he wore in boardrooms when competitors tried to outmaneuver him, the same mask he perfected after his parents died in that car crash when he was 19. Show weakness in Texas, his father used to say, and the coyotes will smell blood. Inside the tower's marble lobby, the noise cut off like a guillotine blade. The air conditioning hit him first, then the silence. His employees, all 347 people who worked in this building, had stopped working. They stood at their desks, in the elevators, by the coffee stations, all staring at him with the same expression, betrayal mixed with morbid curiosity. James removed his Stetson and kept walking. His office occupied the entire 40th floor. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of Houston, the sprawl of concrete and ambition that he'd conquered. But today, the view felt like a prison. Sir. His executive assistant, Rosa Martinez, stood by her desk with red-rimmed eyes. She'd been with him for 12 years, since the company had been nothing but a dream and a demolished bank account. The board is waiting in the conference room. They've called for an emergency vote. James nodded slowly. I know. Mr. Crawford, I don't understand. That video. That's not. Her voice cracked. That's not who you are. For the first time since the video surfaced, something flickered across James's face. Pain, maybe. Or exhaustion. Isn't it? He walked past her into his office and closed the door. The space was exactly as he'd left it Friday evening. Immaculate, ordered, cold. Awards lined one wall. Photographs of ribbon cuttings and charity galas lined another. Everything carefully curated to tell the story of James Crawford, self-made billionaire, philanthropist, Texas success story. All of it was about to be erased by 43 seconds of security footage. James moved to his desk and pulled open the bottom drawer. Inside, beneath quarterly reports and contracts worth millions, sat a single shoe box. His hands trembled as he lifted it, the first sign of weakness he'd allowed himself in 2 days. Inside the box was a photograph. The edges were worn, the colors faded, but the image was clear, a young boy, maybe 8 years old, grinning gap-toothed at the camera. He wore a Little League uniform 3 sizes too big and held a baseball bat like it was Excalibur. Behind him, a chain-link fence and the hazy Houston summer heat. James had looked at this photograph every day for 29 years. His phone buzzed. A text from Patricia. Board vote in 15 minutes. They're voting you out, James. Unless you give them a reason not to. He set down the photograph and pulled up the video that had destroyed him. The footage was grainy, shot from a security camera across the street. The timestamp, Thursday 11:47 p.m. Location, the alley behind Minute Maid Park, where James had been returning to his car after an Astros game. The beggar appeared first, a shambling figure in tattered clothes, hunched and desperate. Then James entered the frame. Words were exchanged. The beggar reached out, grabbed James's arm. And then, James's hands were around the man's throat. The beggar's body went slack. James held on for 3 more seconds before releasing him. The homeless man crumpled to the ground. James stood over him, chest heaving, fists clenched. Then he walked away. Cut to black. What the video didn't show, what happened next. What the video didn't capture, the beggar's face. What the video couldn't reveal, the name the homeless man had whispered before James's hands found his throat. Tommy. James closed his eyes. Outside his office, Houston churned on, oblivious and hungry. The board was gathering. The reporters were sharpening their questions. The internet was building his pyre. But James Crawford wasn't thinking about any of that. He was thinking about a Little League game 29 years ago, when he'd been the boy in that photograph. When his little brother had been alive. When his hands had been clean. His phone buzzed one final time. Patricia, it's time. James picked up the shoebox, tucked it under his arm, and walked out of his office. Rosa looked up as he passed. Mr. Crawford? What should I tell them? James paused, his hand on the conference room door. Behind it, he could hear the murmur of voices, powerful men and women ready to strip him of everything he'd built. Tell them, he said quietly, that some things are worth losing everything for. He pushed open the door. What would you risk everything for? Drop your thoughts below, because this story is just beginning, and the truth is far more devastating than anyone imagines. The conference room fell silent as James entered. 12 faces turned toward him, the board of directors of Crawford Energy, each one handpicked by James himself over the years. Senators' sons, oil dynasty heirs, self-made millionaires who'd clawed their way up from nothing like he had. They sat around the Brazilian rosewood table like judges at a tribunal, their expressions ranging from pity to barely concealed satisfaction. At the head of the table sat Marcus Webb, the company's CFO and James's former college roommate. His weathered face, carved by 30 years in the Texas oil fields before an MBA transformed him into an executive, looked older than his 52 years. James. Marcus's voice carried the weight of a friendship about to be sacrificed. Sit down. I'll stand. Patricia Valdez occupied the corner, her laptop open, her fingers poised over the keyboard like a court stenographer preparing to document an execution. She wouldn't meet his eyes. Then let's not waste time. Richard Ashford, the oldest board member at 68, leaned back in his chair. His family had been Texas oil royalty since Spindletop. We've all seen the video. The DA's office has indicated they're preparing charges. Our stock has dropped 32% since yesterday morning. We've lost 3 major contracts, and Senator Morrison's office called to say they're re-evaluating our relationship. Are you here to explain yourself? Interjected Caroline Jong, the youngest board member at 43, her sharp Houston accent cutting through the room, or to resign. James set the shoebox on the table. The simple gesture created a ripple of confusion. Several board members leaned forward, staring at the battered cardboard as if it might explode. Before you vote, James said quietly, I need to tell you a story. James, Patricia started. His name was Thomas James Crawford. Tommy. James opened the box and removed the photograph, holding it up so they could see the gap-toothed boy in the oversized uniform. My little brother. He was 8 years old in this picture. I was 9. The room had gone completely still. Our parents died in a car accident when I was 19 and Tommy was 18. Drunk driver on I-45, right outside Galveston. You all know this part. It's in every profile ever written about me. Tragic backstory. Orphaned teenager builds empire. Very inspiring. Marcus's face had gone pale. James, what does this have to? What those profiles don't mention is what happened after. James's voice remained steady, but his knuckles had turned white around the photograph's edges. Tommy didn't handle it well. Started drinking. Dropped out of UT Austin his freshman year. I was working 3 jobs, trying to save enough to start Crawford Energy, and he was falling apart. James set down the photograph and pulled out another item from the box, a worn leather wallet. We fought. God, we fought about everything. I told him he needed to get his life together. He told me I cared more about money than family. On his 21st birthday, we had the worst fight of all. I told him. James's voice caught for the first time. I told him that if he couldn't get clean, he wasn't my brother anymore. Caroline Jong's hand had moved to her mouth. He left that night. Just walked out of our apartment in Montrose with nothing but the clothes on his back. I was so angry, so self-righteous, that I didn't go after him. I told myself he needed to hit rock bottom. That he'd come back when he was ready. James opened the wallet, revealing a faded Texas driver's license. That was 16 years ago. I never saw him again. Jesus Christ, Marcus whispered. I searched for years. Hired private investigators. Posted on every website, every shelter database. Nothing. It was like he'd vanished into thin air. James looked up, his grey eyes meeting each board member in turn. Until Thursday night. The weight of understanding began to settle over the room like a suffocating blanket. I was walking back to my car after the Astros game. Took a shortcut through that alley behind Minute Maid Park, same one I always take. And there he was. Sitting against a dumpster, holding a cardboard sign. But I didn't recognize him at first. 16 years on the streets. It changes a person. Patricia had stopped typing. He recognized me, though. Called out my name. Jamie. That's what he used to call me when we were kids. I turned around, and he stood up, and that's when I saw his face. Saw his eyes. James's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. My little brother. The one I'd abandoned. The one I'd spent 16 years trying to find. And he'd been here in Houston the whole time. The video, Richard Ashford said slowly, shows you attacking him. The video shows part of the truth. James reached into the box one final time and pulled out a piece of paper, crumpled, stained, but still legible. He handed me this. He smoothed the paper on the table. It was a medical document from Ben Taub Hospital, dated 6 weeks prior. The diagnosis section made Caroline gasp. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer. Metastatic. Prognosis, 4 to 8 weeks. His dying, James said simply, has been for months. No insurance, no money for treatment, no family to help him because his brother told him he wasn't family anymore. His hands clenched into fists. He told me he'd been looking for me too. That he'd finally gotten clean 5 years ago, worked his way off the streets, got a job at a warehouse in Pasadena. But he was too ashamed to contact me. Too afraid I'd reject him again. The silence in the room was absolute. And then he got sick. Lost his job. Lost his apartment. Ended up back on the streets. He said. James's voice finally broke. He said he'd been working up the courage to approach me for weeks. That he'd seen me at Astros games before but could never. He said he was dying and he just wanted to tell me he was sorry. Sorry for being a burden. Sorry for ruining his life. Sorry for disappointing me. Marcus had tears running down his face. I grabbed him, James continued, his voice raw. Not to hurt him. To hold him. To shake him. To make him understand that he didn't ruin anything. I did. I ruined everything. And when words weren't enough, when he kept apologizing, kept saying he understood why I'd given up on him, I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. My hands were on his throat because I was trying to make him stop. Stop apologizing for surviving. Stop apologizing for being broken when I was the one who broke him. He picked up the wallet again, hand shaking. The video shows 3 seconds of contact. What it doesn't show is the 45 minutes after, when I held him while he cried. When I called every hospital in Houston trying to get him admitted. When I promised him that I would fix this, that I would find the best doctors, that I would spend every penny I have to save him. Where is he now? Patricia asked quietly. MD Anderson. Private suite. Best oncology team in Texas. James looked at her directly. I had him admitted Friday morning. Paid for everything in cash because he doesn't have ID, doesn't have insurance, doesn't legally exist according to most systems. The doctors say it's too late for a cure, but they can make him comfortable. Give him dignity. Give him time. He closed the shoebox and picked it up. So yes, Richard, I attacked a homeless man in an alley. That homeless man was my brother, and I was trying to convince him that his life mattered when he'd spent 16 years believing it didn't. That's the truth. That's what the video doesn't show. James turned toward the door. Wait. Caroline stood up, her voice shaking. You're not staying for the vote. No, James. Marcus rose from his chair. If you explain this publicly, if you tell people who he is, then I violate his privacy and turn his suffering into a PR stunt to save my reputation. James shook his head. No. Tommy spent 16 years invisible. I won't make him a spectacle now. But your company, Richard protested, everything you've built, is worth exactly nothing compared to my brother. James opened the conference room door. Vote however you need to vote. Fire me. Destroy me. I don't care anymore. The only thing I care about is in a hospital room, and I've already wasted 16 years. I'm not wasting another second. He walked out. Behind him, the board sat in stunned silence. Rosa was standing by her desk, and she could tell immediately from his face that something had shifted. Mr. Crawford. Clear my schedule for the next month, James said. Cancel everything. And Rosa, pack up my personal items from the office. I won't be coming back. Sir, the board hasn't even voted. They will. And they should. He pressed the elevator button. Tell them I said they're making the right decision. The elevator doors opened. James stepped inside. As the doors began to close, Rosa called out, Mr. Crawford? For what it's worth. I think your brother is lucky to have you. James's reflection in the polished elevator doors showed something that hadn't been there in years. Tears. No, he whispered as the elevator descended. I'm the lucky one. The drive to MD Anderson took 23 minutes through Houston's midday traffic. James didn't call ahead. Didn't prepare a speech. He simply walked through the gleaming halls of the cancer center, past families huddled in waiting rooms, past doctors making rounds, past all the machinery and medicine designed to fight the inevitable, until he reached room 847. He paused outside the door. Through the small window, he could see Tommy propped up in bed, hooked to and fore, his gaunt frame barely making an impression beneath the white sheets. Someone had helped him shower. His hair was clean, his face shaved. He looked almost like the brother James remembered. Almost. James pushed open the door. Tommy's head turned. When he saw James, his eyes, still that same bright blue despite everything, widened with something between hope and fear. Jamie. His voice was a rasp. You came back. James set down the shoebox and pulled a chair next to the bed. I'm not leaving again. But your company. The news said. I don't care about the company. You built it from nothing. I built it because I didn't know how to do anything else after you left. Because filling my life with work meant I didn't have to face what I'd done. James reached out and took Tommy's hand, bones wrapped in paper-thin skin. You were right that night. I did care more about money than family. And it cost me everything that actually mattered. Tommy's eyes filled with tears. I was such a mess, Jamie. You tried to help me and I couldn't stop. Couldn't get clean. You were better off without. Don't. James's grip tightened. Don't you dare say that. You were grieving, Tommy. You were 18 years old and our parents had just died, and instead of helping you, I gave you an ultimatum. I was so focused on being strong, on not letting grief destroy me, that I couldn't see it was destroying you. I'm dying, Jamie. Tommy said it simply, as if commenting on the weather. Doctor said maybe 6 weeks. Maybe less. I know. I wasted my whole life. No. James pulled the shoebox closer and opened it, showing Tommy the photograph of the gap-toothed boy with the baseball bat. You see this kid? He was my hero. He made me laugh when I was too serious. He taught me how to throw a curveball. He loved me when I didn't deserve it. James looked up, meeting his brother's eyes. That kid is still in there, Tommy. And I'm going to spend every single day you have left reminding you of that. Tommy stared at the photograph, his tears falling freely now. You kept this? All these years? Every day. Even when I was angry. Even when I told myself I'd moved on. Because you were my brother, and nothing, not time, not distance, not my own stupidity, could change that. For a long moment, they sat in silence, broken only by the soft beeping of machines. Then Tommy squeezed James's hand with what little strength he had. I'm scared, Jamie. I know. Not of dying. I made peace with that. I'm scared that when I'm gone, you'll regret this. That you'll wish you'd chosen your company over sitting in this hospital room watching me fade away. James leaned forward, his voice fierce. Listen to me, Tommy. I have spent 16 years regretting. Regretting that fight. Regretting my pride. Regretting every single day I didn't have you in my life. The only thing I would regret now is not being here. Tommy's lips curved into the faintest smile, the first smile James had seen on his face in 16 years. You always were stubborn. Learned it from you. Jamie. Yeah. Thank you for finding me. Even if it was too late. Thank you for coming back. James felt something crack open in his chest, some wall he'd built 16 years ago finally crumbling. It's not too late, Tommy. We still have time. And I'm going to make every second count. Tommy nodded, exhaustion pulling at his features. Will you stay? Just for a little while. I'm not going anywhere. James settled deeper into the chair, still holding his brother's hand. Get some rest. I'll be right here when you wake up. As Tommy's breathing evened out and sleep claimed him, James pulled out his phone. 63 new messages. The board had voted. The news was spreading. Crawford Energy would announce his removal as CEO by end of business day. He deleted them all without reading. Then he texted Rosa, have my personal items delivered to MD Anderson. I'll be living here for the foreseeable future. Through the hospital room window, Houston sprawled out beneath a hazy Texas sky, millions of people going about their lives, building their empires, chasing their dreams. James had been one of them once. Had conquered that city. Had made it bow to his ambition. But as he sat holding his dying brother's hand, watching the gentle rise and fall of Tommy's chest, James realized something profound. He'd spent 16 years building an empire when all he'd ever really needed was right here. His phone buzzed one final time. A news alert. Breaking. Crawford Energy Board votes to remove James Crawford as CEO. Statement claims gross misconduct. Crawford's lawyers refuse comment. James turned off his phone and tossed it in the trash can by the door. Some bridges, once burned, couldn't be rebuilt. But some, like the one between two brothers, were worth dying to restore. If you had one chance to fix your biggest regret, what would you sacrifice to make it right? Tell us in the comments, because this story is about to take a turn no one will see coming. Welcome back, my incredible viewers. Your comments from the last video have been absolutely overwhelming. I can see how deeply you're all connecting with the story, and the theories you've been sharing are absolutely brilliant. Some of you are surprisingly close to the truth of what's coming next. But before we continue, don't forget to smash that like button if you're enjoying what you're seeing. Your support means the world to me and helps this channel grow. If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss any of our uploads. We're building an amazing community here, and I don't want you to miss out on what's coming. And please, share this video with your friends, family, or anyone who would love this type of content. The more people we can bring into this community, the better it gets for everyone. Your engagement in the comments has been incredible, and I love reading every single one of your thoughts and theories. Keep them coming. Now, let's go in depth into the story. 3 weeks passed like water through cupped hands. James learned to read the rhythm of hospital life, the 6 a.m. vitals checks, the shift changes at 7 and 7, the way Tommy's pain medication made him lucid in the mornings and foggy by evening. He learned which nurses were gentle with the 4 insertions and which doctors actually listened when Tommy said something hurt. He learned how to help his brother to the bathroom without either of them acknowledging the indignity of it. He learned how to hold conversations that didn't mention the future because there wasn't much future left to mention. The world outside MD Anderson continued its relentless spin. Crawford Energy's stock stabilized after the board appointed Marcus Webb as interim CEO. The video had been analyzed, dissected, memed, and eventually replaced by newer scandals. Some news outlets tried to dig deeper. There were rumors about James's mysterious dedication to a homeless patient, but his lawyers had locked down Tommy's medical records tighter than Fort Knox. James didn't care about any of it. He'd moved into Tommy's hospital room, sleeping on the fold-out chair that the night nurses converted into a bed. Rosa delivered his clothes and toiletries. Patricia sent documents that needed signing for the legal separation from Crawford Energy. Marcus called twice a day with updates James never listened to completely. "You need to take care of yourself," Rosa told him on day 19, when she visited with James's mail and found him unshaven, wearing the same shirt as yesterday. "When's the last time you ate something besides hospital cafeteria food?" "Rosa, I'm fine." "You're not fine. You look like..." She stopped herself. "Like what?" James's voice was gentle. "Like someone watching their brother die." She set down the mail and sat in the visitor's chair. "Mr. Crawford." "James. What you're doing is beautiful. But you're disappearing into this room. The world is still out there. Let it be." James glanced at Tommy, who was sleeping after a particularly rough morning. "I spent 48 years out there, Rosa. Building things, conquering things, proving things. And none of it mattered. This," he gestured at the hospital room, at his brother's fragile form, "this is the only thing that's ever really mattered." Rosa was quiet for a moment. Then, "He's lucky to have you. But James? I think he'd want you to still have a life after." She didn't finish the sentence. Nobody ever finished those sentences in hospitals. "I'll worry about that after," James said. "Right now, I'm exactly where I need to be." After Rosa left, James opened the mail she'd brought. Bills, mostly. Legal documents. And one hand-delivered letter with no return address. He almost threw it away. Then he noticed the handwriting, shaky, uncertain, written with obvious effort. "Mr. Crawford. My name is Donnell Washington. You don't know me, but I knew your brother. We lived in the same homeless camp under I-45 for about 3 years, until I got into a program and got off the streets last year. Tommy talked about you all the time. Said his brother was some big shot businessman, but he was too ashamed to contact you because he'd messed up his life so bad. I told him family don't care about that stuff, but he wouldn't listen. Said you deserved better than a junkie brother. I saw the video on the news. Saw what people were saying about you. I don't know what really happened in that alley, but I know Tommy. And I know he loved you more than anything in this world. Whatever went down between you two, I hope you know he never stopped being proud of you. There's something else you should know. About 6 months ago, Tommy found out he was sick. He could have gone to a shelter, could have asked for help. But he didn't. You want to know why? He was saving money. Every dollar he got from panhandling, every penny from the warehouse job before he got too sick to work, he was saving it. Had it all in a coffee can buried near our camp. Said he was going to send it to you someday with a note. Was going to prove he could get his life together, that he wasn't a total waste. When he got too sick to work, he used that money to survive. But before he did, he told me if anything happened to him, I should find you and tell you something. He was sorry. Sorry for not being strong like you. Sorry for letting you down. And sorry for loving you so much that he'd rather die alone than risk you rejecting him again. I don't know if this helps. But I thought you should know your brother spent the last years of his life trying to be someone you could be proud of. The coffee can is at coordinates 29.7604 degrees north, 95.3698 degrees west, buried 2 feet deep near the bridge support. There's probably about $3,200 in it. Tommy would want you to have it. Tell him Donnell says he was the best friend I ever had. D. Washington. James read the letter 3 times. Then he folded it carefully and slipped it into the shoebox that now lived on Tommy's bedside table, next to the photograph of the gap-toothed boy. He sat down heavily in his chair and stared at his brother's sleeping face. $3,200. Tommy had saved $3,200. James spent more than that on a single dinner sometimes. Tipped more than that to valets and hotel staff without thinking. $3,200 was nothing to James Crawford the billionaire. But to Tommy Crawford the homeless man, dying of cancer, too proud to ask for help? It was everything. James put his face in his hands and wept. Tommy woke an hour later to find James sitting by the window, staring out at the Houston skyline. Jamie. His voice was weaker than yesterday. The doctors said that would keep happening. You okay? James turned, and Tommy could see his brother had been crying. Yeah, Tommy. I'm okay. You're a terrible liar. Tommy tried to smile. Always have been. James pulled his chair closer. Tommy, can I ask you something? Course. Why didn't you call me? After you got clean. After you got the job in Pasadena. You knew where I was. My number was public. Why didn't you reach out? Tommy's eyes shifted to the window. You really want to know? I do. Because I was terrified. Tommy's voice was barely a whisper. Terrified you'd hang up. Terrified you'd tell me you'd moved on. Terrified you'd look at me the same way you did that last night, like I was broken and you were tired of trying to fix me. He looked back at James. I couldn't survive you rejecting me twice, Jamie. So I just didn't try. I wouldn't have rejected you. I know that now. But back then, I was so sure I'd ruined everything. That I'd burned that bridge so bad there was no way back. Tommy's hand found James's. It's stupid, right? I spent years being too scared to call my own brother. It's not stupid, James said quietly. I spent years being too proud to admit I was wrong. We're both idiots. Tommy laughed, a wheezing, painful sound that turned into a cough. James helped him sip water until it subsided. Jamie, can I tell you something? Anything. I'm glad I got sick. James froze. Tommy. No, listen. I mean it. Tommy squeezed his brother's hand with what little strength he had left. If I hadn't gotten sick, I never would have worked up the courage to approach you. I would have died someday under that bridge, and you never would have known. You would have spent the rest of your life wondering where I was. His blue eyes were clear, lucid. This way? We got 3 weeks. 3 weeks of being brothers again. That's 3 weeks more than I thought I'd ever get. It's not enough. Nothing would be enough, Jamie. But it's something. And something is everything when you thought you had nothing. Tommy settled deeper into his pillows, exhaustion claiming him again. Promise me you won't feel guilty after I'm gone. Promise me you'll remember these 3 weeks instead of those 16 years. James couldn't speak. Could barely breathe. Promise me, Jamie. I promise, James managed. But Tommy, I'm not ready to let you go yet. I know. Me neither. Tommy's eyes began to drift closed. But ready or not, it's coming. So we'd better make the time we have left count. How? Tommy's lips curved into a faint smile. Tell me a story. Tell me about all the things you built after I left. Tell me about Crawford Energy. Make me proud, Jamie. Let me hear about my big brother conquering the world. So James told him. He talked until his voice went hoarse. Told Tommy about the first oil well that came up dry and the second one that struck black gold. About the environmental lawsuits and the board battles and the moment Crawford Energy went public and James became a billionaire overnight. About the charity foundations he'd started, homeless shelters, Tommy, 4 of them across Houston, and the scholarships he'd funded and the hospital wings he'd paid for. Tommy listened with his eyes closed, that small smile never leaving his face. "You did good, Jamie," he whispered when James finally fell silent. "You did real good. None of it means anything without you here to share it with. Then share it with someone else. Find someone to love. Have kids. Build a family." Tommy's hand tightened weakly around James's. "Don't let my death be the end of your life. Let it be the beginning of actually living." "How am I supposed to do that?" "The same way you built a billion-dollar company from nothing." Tommy's voice was fading, sleep pulling him under. "One day at a time. One choice at a time. One moment of courage at a time." James sat in the dimming light of the hospital room, holding his brother's hand, and wondered if courage was something you could learn or something you were born with. Tommy had been brave enough to approach him in that alley, knowing James might reject him. Tommy had been brave enough to save $3,200 while dying, hoping to prove he was worth something. Tommy was brave enough to face death with grace, worried more about James's future than his own lack of one. Maybe courage wasn't about not being afraid. Maybe it was about being terrified and doing the hard thing anyway. On day 23, Tommy's condition deteriorated rapidly. The doctors had warned this would happen, that cancer moved slow until suddenly it didn't, that there would be good days and then there wouldn't be any more good days. James woke at 4 a.m. to the sound of alarms and nurses rushing into the room. What's happening? He was on his feet instantly, his heart hammering. His oxygen levels are dropping. Dr. Sarah Hernandez, Tommy's oncologist, was checking vitals with practiced efficiency. "We need to intubate." "No." Tommy's voice was a rasp, but it was firm. "No tubes." "Tommy," James started. "We discussed this, remember?" Tommy looked at his brother, his blue eyes still sharp despite the pain-etching lines across his gaunt face. "No heroic measures. No machines. When it's time, it's time." "It's not time," James said desperately. "It's not. Jamie." Tommy reached out, and James grabbed his hand like a drowning man clutching a lifeline. "It's okay. I'm ready." "I'm not." "I know. But you will be." Tommy looked at Dr. Hernandez. "How long?" She hesitated, her professional mask slipping to reveal genuine sorrow. "Hours. Maybe a day if we keep you comfortable with medication." Tommy nodded slowly. Then he looked back at James. "Then I guess we'd better make them count." Dr. Hernandez dimmed the lights and adjusted Tommy's medication. The alarms quieted. The urgency faded. What remained was just two brothers and the inexorable march of time. "Tell me about when we were kids," Tommy whispered. "The good stuff. Before Mom and Dad died. Before everything went wrong." So James did. He told Tommy about the summer they built a treehouse in the backyard of their Pearland home, how it had collapsed the first time they climbed into it and Dad had laughed so hard he cried. About the time Tommy had gotten chickenpox and James had drawn dots on his own face with marker so Tommy wouldn't feel alone. About their mother's terrible cooking and their father's worst jokes and the way they'd all pile into the station wagon every Sunday for trips to Galveston. "We were happy," Tommy said softly. "Weren't we?" "Yeah, Tommy. We were so happy. I wish we could go back. Just for a day. Just to tell them we loved them one more time." James's throat closed up. "Me too." The sky outside began to lighten, Houston's dawn pushing back the darkness one stubborn inch at a time. Tommy's breathing had become labored, each inhale a visible effort. "Jamie. I'm here. Thank you. For these 3 weeks. For coming back. For not giving up on me even when I'd given up on myself." A tear slid down Tommy's cheek. "You were always the best brother anyone could ask for. Even when I was too stupid to see it. You were the best brother, Tommy. You taught me how to laugh. How to love. How to be human instead of just surviving." James leaned forward, his forehead touching Tommy's. "I love you. I never stopped loving you. Not for one single day." "I know," Tommy whispered. "I always knew." The sun broke over the Houston skyline, flooding the hospital room with golden light. Tommy took a shuddering breath. "Jamie? I'm scared." "Don't be. I've got you. I'm right here. Don't leave me. Never again. I promise." Tommy's eyes closed. His breathing slowed. And James Crawford, who had built empires, commanded boardrooms, and conquered a city, did the only thing left that mattered. He held his brother's hand and waited for the end. Thomas James Crawford died at 6:47 a.m. on a Wednesday morning, with his brother holding his hand and the Texas sun painting the sky gold. The doctors were gentle. The nurses were kind. They gave James as much time as he needed before they had to take the body away. James sat in that hospital room for 2 hours, still holding Tommy's hand even though there was no life left in it. He didn't cry. Couldn't cry. There was something hollow inside him where tears should have been, some vast empty space that had once held his brother. Finally, a soft knock on the door. Rosa stood in the doorway, tears streaming down her face. "James. I'm so sorry." He nodded, still not looking away from Tommy's face. Is there anyone you want me to call? Anyone who should know?" "No." James's voice sounded strange to his own ears, distant, mechanical. "There's no one left. It was just us." Rosa approached carefully and placed a hand on his shoulder. "What do you need?" James finally looked up at her. "I need to bury my brother. Can you help me arrange that?" "Of course. Whatever you need." "And Rosa?" "The funeral. I want it public. I want people to know who he was. No more hiding. No more shame." James looked back at Tommy's peaceful face. He spent too much of his life invisible. I won't let him die invisible too. Rosa squeezed his shoulder gently. "I'll take care of everything." After she left, James carefully released Tommy's hand and stood on shaking legs. He pulled out the photograph from the shoebox, the gap-toothed boy with the baseball bat, and tucked it into Tommy's folded hands. "You were always my hero, Tommy," he whispered. "Even when I forgot. Especially when I forgot." He kissed his brother's forehead one last time. Then James Matthew Crawford walked out of that hospital room and into a world that suddenly seemed impossibly empty. Have you ever lost someone and wished you had one more day to say the things left unsaid? Share your thoughts below, because what happens next will prove that some endings are really just beginnings. The funeral was scheduled for Saturday at Grace Community Church in Pearland, the same church where their parents' funeral had been held 29 years ago. James spent Thursday and Friday in a fog, going through motions he barely registered. He signed papers, approved arrangements, chose a casket, selected hymns he remembered from childhood. Every decision felt both monumentally important and utterly meaningless. On Friday afternoon, Patricia called. "James, I need to talk to you about the funeral. If this is about legal liability." "It's not. It's about..." She paused. "The media is going to be there. You know that, right? The moment you announce this publicly, every reporter in Texas will show up. Let them come. They're going to ask questions. About the video. About why you didn't tell anyone who he was. They're going to turn your brother's funeral into a circus." James stared out the window of his Houston penthouse, the one he'd barely lived in for 3 weeks. "Then I'll give them a statement. Tell them everything. Let them judge me however they want." James. He was invisible for 16 years. Patricia. Invisible because I was too proud to find him. Too ashamed to admit I'd failed him. I won't let him be invisible anymore. Patricia was quiet for a long moment. "You're a good man, James Crawford. I hope you know that." "I'm really not." "Yes," she said firmly, "you are. And tomorrow, the world is going to see it." Saturday morning dawned grey and heavy, the sky promising rain. James stood in front of his bathroom mirror, adjusting the black tie he'd worn to his parents' funeral 3 decades ago. It still fit. He'd kept it all these years, tucked in the back of his closet like a talisman against loss. It hadn't worked. His phone buzzed. "Marcus, I'm here if you need me. All of us from the board are. Whatever happened before, it doesn't matter today." James didn't respond. He picked up the shoebox, now containing only Donnell's letter and a few other mementos, and headed downstairs. Miguel was waiting with the Escalade. They drove to Pearland in silence, watching Houston sprawl give way to suburbs, then to the smaller streets of James's childhood. The church parking lot was packed with news vans, cameras, reporters with microphones. Patricia had been right. It was already a circus. But as Miguel pulled around back to the private entrance, James saw something that made his breath catch. People. Hundreds of people. They lined the sidewalk leading to the church entrance, standing quietly in the drizzle that had started to fall. Not reporters. Not curiosity seekers. Homeless men and women. Some in donated suits clearly borrowed for the occasion. Some in their street clothes, cleaned as best they could manage. Some holding cardboard signs with messages written in shaky handwriting. Tommy was our friend, he shared his food when he had none. Rest easy brother, you mattered. James stepped out of the Escalade, and a ripple went through the crowd. An older black man stepped forward, 60s, weathered face, kind eyes. He extended his hand. Mr. Crawford? I'm Donnell Washington. James shook his hand, his throat tight. You wrote me that letter. Yes, sir. And I wanted you to know, all these folks here, they knew Tommy. Loved him. He was one of us, and we take care of our own, even in death. Donnell gestured at the crowd. We wanted to make sure he wasn't alone today. He's not alone, James managed. Thank you. Thank you all. A woman stepped forward, maybe 40, hollow-cheeked, holding the hand of a small girl who couldn't have been more than 6. Tommy gave my daughter his blanket last winter when she was sick. We didn't have nothing, and he didn't have much more, but he gave her his blanket. Tears streamed down her face. He was a good man, Mr. Crawford. The best of us. One by one, they came forward. Sharing stories. Sharing memories. Painting a picture of Tommy Crawford that James had never fully known. A man who shared his meager food, who made people laugh with terrible jokes, who looked after the sick and the vulnerable even when he was sick and vulnerable himself. He talked about you all the time, an elderly Hispanic man said, his accent thick with emotion. Said his brother was going to change the world. Said you were the smartest, strongest man he knew. He was so proud of you, even when he thought you'd forgotten about him. James had to turn away, overwhelmed. Rosa appeared at his elbow. James. It's time. The church was packed beyond capacity. The homeless community filled the first 10 rows. Behind them sat Crawford Energy employees, current and former, who'd come despite the company's official silence. Behind them, James saw familiar faces from Houston's business community, society figures, even a few politicians. And in the back, cameras. Dozens of them. Waiting. Tommy's casket sat at the front of the church, simple pine with brass handles. On top, the photograph of the gap-toothed boy with the baseball bat. Reverend Michael Torres, who'd buried James's parents, stood at the pulpit. His hair had gone white, but his voice was still strong. We gather today to remember Thomas James Crawford. Brother. Friend. Child of God. A life that mattered, even when the world tried to tell him it didn't. The service was simple. Hymns Tommy had loved as a child. Readings from scripture about the lost being found, the broken being made whole. No eulogy yet. That would come from James. When Reverend Torres called him forward, James walked to the pulpit on legs that felt like water. He looked out at the sea of faces. At the homeless community in their borrowed suits. At his former employees. At the cameras in the back recording every word. He pulled a folded piece of paper from his pocket, notes he'd prepared, then set it aside. My name is James Crawford, he began, his voice steady. And I'm here to tell you about my brother, Tommy. The church went completely silent. 29 years ago, our parents died in a car accident. I was 19. Tommy was 18. And I thought I had to be strong. I thought strength meant not breaking down. Not showing weakness. Not letting grief consume me. So I worked. I planned. I built. And while I was busy being strong, my little brother was falling apart. James gripped the edges of the pulpit. He started drinking. Using drugs. Trying to numb the pain I refused to acknowledge. And instead of helping him, instead of seeing that his way of grieving was just as valid as mine, I judged him. I gave him ultimatums. I told him that if he couldn't get his life together, he wasn't my brother anymore. Someone in the crowd gasped. On his 21st birthday, we had a fight. I told him he was weak. That he was a disappointment. That I couldn't save him if he wouldn't save himself. And he left. Just walked out of our apartment and out of my life. That was 16 years ago. James looked at the casket. I spent 16 years looking for him. Hiring private investigators. Posting on databases. donating to homeless shelters, 4 of them across Houston, hoping that maybe, somehow, he'd walk through the doors of one and I'd get another chance. But I never found him. Never got that chance. He paused, collecting himself. Until 3 weeks ago, when I took a shortcut through an alley behind Minute Maid Park. And there he was. My little brother. The one I'd spent 16 years searching for. He'd been in Houston the whole time. Living on the streets. Dying of cancer. Too ashamed to contact me because I'd made him believe he wasn't worth loving. The reporters in the back were leaning forward now, cameras forgotten in the weight of the moment. You've all seen the video, James continued. The one that went viral. The one that shows me attacking a homeless man. That homeless man was Tommy. And I wasn't attacking him, I was trying to make him understand that his life mattered. That I was sorry. That I'd been wrong. His voice cracked. But I was too late. The cancer was too advanced. The doctors said maybe 6 to 8 weeks. We got 3. 3 weeks of being brothers again. 3 weeks of conversations and memories and making peace with the past. It wasn't enough. It will never be enough. But it was everything. James pulled out Donnell's letter and read it aloud, every word about Tommy saving $3,200, about being too proud to ask for help, about loving his brother so much he'd rather die alone than risk rejection. By the time he finished, there wasn't a dry eye in the church. I'm telling you this, James said, because I want you to understand something. That video you saw? That moment of what looked like violence? That was actually love. Desperate. Imperfect. 16 years too late love. But love nonetheless. He looked directly at the cameras. And I want every single person watching this to know, Tommy Crawford was not just a homeless man. He was not just a statistic. He was not invisible. He was a son, a brother, a friend. He was kind when the world was cruel. He was generous when he had nothing. He was brave when he was terrified. He was everything I should have been and wasn't. James's hands trembled on the pulpit. I lost my company over that video. Lost my reputation. Lost everything I'd spent 29 years building. And you know what? I'd do it again. I'd lose it all 1,000 times over for those 3 weeks with my brother. Because in those 3 weeks, I learned what actually matters in this life. Not money. Not power. Not success. People. Connection. Love. The chance to tell someone you're sorry. The grace to be forgiven. The courage to forgive yourself. He looked at the homeless community in the front rows. Tommy found that grace. He found it in the community of people who loved him when he felt unlovable. Who saw his worth when he couldn't see it himself. Who stood by him until the end. James's voice strengthened. And now I'm going to spend the rest of my life honoring that. Honoring him. He pulled a document from his jacket pocket. This morning, I signed paperwork establishing the Thomas Crawford Foundation. Every penny I have left, every asset, every investment, every cent, goes into this foundation. Its mission, to provide housing, healthcare, and job training for Houston's homeless population. To make sure that no one else has to die alone in an alley, unknown and unmourned. To make sure every person on these streets knows they matter. Gasps rippled through the church. Tommy spent his life invisible. I'm going to spend mine making sure no one else has to be. James looked at his brother's casket one final time. I love you, Tommy. I'm sorry I didn't say it enough when you were alive. But I'm saying it now, and I'll keep saying it with every life this foundation saves. You mattered. You matter. You will always matter. He stepped down from the pulpit. The church erupted. People stood, the homeless community first, then everyone else, applauding through their tears. Not the polite golf clap of formal occasions, but raw, genuine appreciation. Recognition. Respect. James walked to the casket and placed his hand on the smooth pine. Rest easy, little brother, he whispered. I've got it from here. The burial was private. Just James, Rosa, Patricia, Marcus, and Donnell at the cemetery plot James had purchased next to their parents' graves. As the casket was lowered into the ground, James dropped the photograph of the gap-toothed boy into the grave. Together again, he said softly. Just like it should have been all along. After the others left, James stood alone by the fresh grave as evening fell over Pearland. His phone had been buzzing incessantly, interview requests, foundation inquiries, messages of support. He ignored all of it. Finally, one text made him look. Marcus. Board meeting Monday. We want to discuss bringing you back as CEO. The foundation can operate alongside Crawford Energy. You don't have to choose between business and doing good. James stared at the message for a long time. Then he typed, I appreciate it, but no. I spent 29 years building Crawford Energy. Time to build something that actually matters. He turned off his phone and sat down in the grass beside Tommy's grave. You know what's funny, Tommy? James said to the fresh-turned earth. I thought losing the company would destroy me. Thought my identity was all wrapped up in being James Crawford, Billionaire CEO. But sitting in that hospital room with you, watching you face death with more grace than I've faced anything in my life, that's when I realized I'd been building the wrong thing all along. The sun set over Houston in the distance, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. I don't know if I can do this, James admitted. Don't know if I can actually make a difference. Don't know if this foundation will save anyone or if I'm just trying to assuage my guilt. But I have to try. For you. For all those people at your funeral who loved you when I couldn't. For every person out there who feels invisible. A breeze rustled through the cemetery trees. I promise you, Tommy, I won't waste this. I won't waste the second chance you gave me by dying. I won't waste the lesson you taught me about what really matters. James placed his hand on the dirt. You spent your life being invisible. I'm going to spend mine making sure everyone sees. He sat there until full dark, talking to his brother, making promises to a grave. Finally, he stood, brushed the grass from his pants, and walked back to where Miguel waited with the Escalade. Where to, Mr. Crawford? James looked back one more time at the cemetery, at the fresh grave that held his brother, his childhood, and the man he used to be. The coordinates 29.7604 degrees north, 95.3698 degrees west, he said. Under the I-45 bridge. There's something there I need to retrieve. They found the spot by flashlight, a homeless encampment that had been recently cleared, leaving behind tarps, broken shopping carts, and the ghosts of lives lived in the margins. James dug with his bare hands, 2 feet down near the bridge support, until his fingers hit metal. The coffee can was rusted, dented, sealed with duct tape. Inside, $3,247 in crumpled bills and loose change. Tommy's savings. Tommy's pride. Tommy's proof that he was worth something. James held the can and wept. Not the silent tears of the hospital room or the controlled grief of the funeral. This was something primal, something that had been building for 16 years, all the regret, all the love, all the loss finally breaking through the walls he'd built. Miguel stood at a respectful distance, saying nothing. When James finally composed himself, he looked at the money in the can, money Tommy had saved penny by penny while dying, and made a decision. Miguel, how much do you think it would cost to build a shelter here? Right here, on this spot. Miguel looked around at the bridge support, the cleared encampment, the highway overhead. I don't know, sir. Maybe a couple million? Zoning would be complicated, but... Then that's what we'll do. The first Thomas Crawford Foundation shelter. Right here. Where Tommy spent his last years. Where he saved this money hoping to prove he was worth something. James clutched the coffee can to his chest. He was worth everything, Miguel. Everything. Yes, sir. He was. James looked up at the I-45 overpass, at the Houston skyline glittering in the distance. He'd conquered that city once as a billionaire. Now he'd save it as a brother. What's the greatest gift someone ever gave you? Not in money, but in love, sacrifice, or grace? Tell us in the comments, because this story's final chapter will show you that the greatest victories aren't found in boardrooms, but in the hearts we change along the way. 6 months later, James stood in front of a newly constructed building on the corner of Franklin and San Jacinto, in the heart of Houston's downtown. The structure was 4 stories tall, modern but warm, with large windows that let in natural light and a design that prioritized dignity over institutional efficiency. Above the entrance, bronze letters gleamed in the Texas sun, Thomas Crawford Center for Hope. It was dedication day. The sidewalk was packed, not with reporters this time, though a few remained. Mostly it was filled with the people the center was built to serve, Houston's homeless population, advocates, social workers, former Crawford Energy employees who'd volunteered their time to make this happen, and the construction crews who'd worked overtime to complete it in record time. Rosa stood beside James, holding a folder of notes. You ready? James adjusted his black Stetson, the same one he'd worn through everything, and nodded. Yeah, I'm ready. 6 months. In 6 months, James's life had been completely dismantled and rebuilt into something he barely recognized. The Crawford Energy Board had tried twice more to bring him back. He declined both times. Marcus was doing fine as CEO, and James had discovered something surprising. He didn't miss it. Didn't miss the boardrooms or the power plays or the endless pursuit of more. What he missed was Tommy. Would always miss Tommy. But Tommy's death had cracked James open in a way that allowed something new to grow. The Thomas Crawford Foundation had been established with $847 million, everything James had left after legal fees and settlements. Some people called him crazy for giving away his entire fortune. The internet had memes about it. Financial advisors used him as a cautionary tale about emotional decision-making. James didn't care. In 6 months, the foundation had opened 3 emergency shelters across Houston, established a mobile health clinic that provided free medical care to the homeless, created a job training program in partnership with local businesses, funded transitional housing for 200 families, hired 47 formerly homeless individuals as staff members. And this, the Thomas Crawford Center, was the crown jewel. A comprehensive facility offering medical care, mental health services, addiction treatment, job training, legal aid, and temporary housing, all under one roof. Everything Tommy never had access to. Everything that might have saved him if James hadn't been too proud to find him sooner. Reverend Torres stepped up to the microphone. Friends, we gather today to dedicate this building to the memory of a man who taught us that every life has value. Thomas Crawford lived and died knowing love, even in the darkest circumstances. And now, through his brother's work, that love will extend to thousands more who need it. The crowd applauded. Donnell Washington was next. He'd been hired as the center's outreach coordinator, using his decades of street experience to connect with people others couldn't reach. Tommy was my friend, he said simply. And he'd be real proud of what his brother's doing here. This ain't charity. This is family taking care of family. And on the streets, we're all family. More applause. Then it was James's turn. He approached the microphone, looking out at the faces before him. 6 months ago, he would have been nervous speaking to this crowd, not because they were poor or homeless, but because he'd spent so long insulated from reality by wealth and power. Now, these were his people. His purpose. I'm not going to give a long speech, James began. Because Tommy hated long speeches. He was a man of action, not words. So instead, I want to tell you what this building represents. He gestured at the center behind him. This building represents a simple truth, that every person matters. That your circumstances don't define your worth. That homelessness isn't a moral failure, it's a systemic failure that we, as a society, have the power to address. James paused, his voice strengthening. My brother lived on these streets for 16 years. He was kind, generous, brave, and loving. He was also addicted, traumatized, and sick. Both things were true. And our society told him that because of his struggles, he didn't deserve help. Didn't deserve dignity. Didn't deserve to be seen. He looked directly at the homeless men and women in the crowd. I'm here to tell you that's a lie. You deserve help. You deserve dignity. You deserve to be seen. And this center, this is our promise to you. We see you. We value you. And we're going to fight like hell to make sure you have every opportunity to rebuild your lives. The crowd erupted in applause. But I need to be clear about something, James continued when the noise died down. This isn't about me playing savior. I'm not here to rescue anyone. You're going to rescue yourselves, with support, with resources, with the dignity of being treated like human beings instead of problems to be solved. My job is just to provide the tools. You're going to do the actual work. He pulled out a set of keys. So with that said, let me introduce you to some people who know exactly what that work looks like. James gestured to his right, where 5 individuals stood. These are 5 of our center's first hires. All 5 were homeless less than a year ago. All 5 went through our job training program. And now they're staff members who will help run this facility. The first person stepped forward, a young woman, maybe 25, with bright eyes and a nervous smile. My name is Sarah Chen. I was on the streets for 3 years after aging out of foster care. Mr. Crawford's foundation gave me a chance when everyone else saw a lost cause. Now I'm a case manager here, and I get to help other people find their way home. Next, a middle-aged man with graying temples and steady hands. I'm Robert Martinez. I lost everything to alcoholism. My family, my job, my house. Been sober 8 months now, thanks to the treatment program the foundation funded. I'm the center's facilities manager. One by one, they shared their stories. Each different. Each heartbreaking. Each ending with hope. When they finished, there wasn't a dry eye in the crowd. James stepped back to the microphone. Tommy used to tell me, when we were kids, that the measure of a man isn't what he builds for himself, it's what he leaves behind for others. I didn't understand that then. I spent 29 years building an empire for myself. Building wealth, power, success. And it was all empty. He looked up at the bronze letters. Thomas Crawford Center for Hope. This is what Tommy meant. This is the legacy that matters. Not the buildings with my name on them, but the lives changed inside them. Not the fortune I accumulated, but the hope I can help create. Not the empire I built, but the family I found. James pulled out his phone and held up a photograph, the one of the gap-toothed boy with the baseball bat, now his phone's wallpaper. Tommy, if you're watching, and I like to think you are, this is for you, little brother. Every life saved in this building. Every person who finds hope here. Every family reunited. Every addiction overcome. Every second chance given. That's your legacy. That's what your life meant. His voice cracked, but he pushed through. You thought you didn't matter. You thought you'd wasted your life. But you were wrong, Tommy. You changed everything. You changed me. And now, through that change, we're going to change this city. One person at a time. One day at a time. One moment of courage at a time. The crowd rose to its feet, applauding. James cut the ribbon. The doors to the Thomas Crawford Center for Hope opened. And Houston's Invisible began to walk inside. Later that evening, after the ceremonies ended and the crowds dispersed, James found himself alone in what would be his new office on the center's 4th floor. It was smaller than his Crawford Tower office had been. No panoramic views. No awards on the walls. Just a simple desk, a computer, and a window overlooking Franklin Street where he could see the people the center was built to serve. Perfect. Rosa knocked on the open door. You plan on sleeping here too? Because I'm getting déjà vu from the hospital. James smiled, something he'd been doing more often these days. No. I'm heading home soon. Just taking it all in. Rosa entered and sat in the visitor's chair. You know, when I first met you 12 years ago, you were the most driven, ambitious, ruthless businessman I'd ever seen. You terrified me, honestly. And now? Now you're the most driven, ambitious person I've ever seen, just pointed in a better direction. She leaned forward. James, what you've built here in 6 months, it's extraordinary. Tommy would be so proud. I hope so. James looked at the photograph on his desk. He'd had it framed. I still miss him every single day, Rosa. Some days it feels like I can't breathe from missing him. That's love. It doesn't go away just because someone dies. You carry it with you. Let it fuel you instead of destroy you. Rosa stood. And from where I'm sitting, you're doing exactly that. After she left, James sat in the quiet office as Houston's lights flickered on across the city. His phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. Saw the dedication on the news. Incredible work, James. We miss you at Crawford Energy, but you're exactly where you need to be. Another text, from Patricia. Your brother would be proud. Hell, I'm proud. You're doing something that actually matters. And one more, from an unknown number. Mr. Crawford, this is Sarah Chen from the center. I just wanted to say thank you. Not just for the job, but for seeing me as a person when everyone else saw a problem. You saved my life. I won't waste it. James stared at that last message for a long time. Then he opened a new document on his computer and began to write. The Thomas Crawford Foundation, Year 1 Goals. 1. Open 5 more comprehensive centers across Texas. 2. Establish a scholarship program for homeless youth. 3. Create partnerships with 50 businesses for job placement. 4. Provide medical care to 10,000 individuals. 5. House 500 families in transitional housing 6. Prove that every single person matters. He typed for an hour, the words flowing like they never had in boardrooms or business meetings. This wasn't about profit margins or market share. This was about lives. About hope. About making sure Tommy's death meant something. Finally, exhausted but satisfied, James saved the document and shut down his computer. He picked up the framed photograph of his brother. "I'm doing it, Tommy," he whispered. "I'm building something that matters. Something that would make you proud. Something that will outlast both of us." He set the photograph back on his desk, positioned so it would be the first thing he saw every morning. Then James Crawford, no longer a billionaire, no longer a CEO, but finally, truly his brother's keeper, turned off the lights and walked out of the Thomas Crawford Center for Hope. Tomorrow, the real work would begin. Tomorrow, and every day after. The conference room at the Thomas Crawford Foundation headquarters, converted from the old Crawford Energy building that James had bought back for this purpose, was packed with staff, volunteers, and board members. James stood at the head of the table, grayer at the temples now but steadier in ways that had nothing to do with age. Rosa sat to his right, now the Foundation's executive director. Donnell to his left, promoted to director of community outreach. 3 years, James began, looking around the room at faces that had become family. 3 years since we opened the first center. Want to know what we've accomplished? He pulled up a presentation on the screen. Thomas Crawford Foundation, 3-year impact. 12 comprehensive centers across Texas. 4,237 individuals housed in permanent housing. 8,891 people received medical care. 1,247 graduates of job training programs. A 67% employment rate among program participants. $0 in salaries for executive leadership, all volunteer-run at top levels. 847 families reunited. 23 lives directly saved through overdose prevention programs. Countless lives changed. The room erupted in applause. But numbers don't tell the whole story, James continued. The real story is in the faces. The single mother who now has keys to her own apartment. The veteran who finally got treatment for PTSD. The teenager who aged out of foster care and didn't end up on the streets because we were there. He clicked to the next slide, a photograph of Sarah Chen, who now ran the entire Houston Center, standing with a young woman who just completed the program. "That's Emily Rodriguez." Sarah's voice came from the back of the room, where she stood. "She came to us 6 months ago. Homeless, addicted, convinced her life was over at 22. Today, she's 3 months sober and starts a new job as a paralegal on Monday. That's what we do. That's why we exist." More applause. James smiled, but then his expression grew serious. "I want to tell you all something. When Tommy died, I thought my life was over too. Thought I'd lost everything that mattered. And in a way, I'd lost my brother, my company, my reputation, my identity as James Crawford the billionaire." He paused. "But what I found was so much better. I found purpose. I found family, not in blood, but in mission. I found out who I actually was when everything else was stripped away. And I found Tommy again, not in hospitals or cemeteries, but in every person we help. Every life we save. Every moment of hope we create." James looked at the photograph of his brother, which hung on the wall of every Crawford Center. 3 years ago, I made Tommy a promise at his grave. I promised I wouldn't waste the second chance he gave me. That I'd make sure no one else had to be invisible. That I'd build something that actually mattered. His voice strengthened. "We're keeping that promise. Every single day. And we're not going to stop until every person in this state, in this country, knows that they matter. That they're seen. That they're loved." The room rose in a standing ovation. After the meeting, James found himself on the building's rooftop terrace, looking out over Houston. The city had changed in 3 years, or maybe he'd changed, and now he saw it differently. Either way, what he saw now wasn't just glass towers and concrete sprawl. He saw people. Stories. Possibilities. His phone rang. An unknown number. "This is James Crawford." "Mr. Crawford." A woman's voice, nervous but determined. "My name is Linda Washington. Donnell's sister. He talks about you all the time, but I wasn't sure I should call. Is everything okay?" Yes. No. I mean. She took a breath. My son, Marcus, he's 16. Good kid, but he's been struggling. His father left, money's tight, and he's starting to run with the wrong crowd. I'm terrified he's going to end up where Donnell was. On the streets. Lost. James's heart clenched. What do you need? Donnell said your foundation has programs for at-risk youth. Mentorship. Job training. I know it's a long shot, but I thought, maybe. Linda. James cut her off gently. Bring Marcus to the downtown center tomorrow at 9 a.m. Ask for Sarah Chen. Tell her I sent you. We'll take care of him. Just like that. Just like that. That's what we do. That's why we exist. Linda started crying. Thank you. God bless you, Mr. Crawford. You're saving my son's life. After she hung up, James stayed on the rooftop as the sun set over Houston. Another kid. Another chance. Another opportunity to make sure what happened to Tommy didn't happen to someone else. He pulled out his phone and looked at his wallpaper, still that photograph of the gap-toothed boy with the baseball bat. Another one. Tommy, he whispered. Another kid who won't fall through the cracks. Another family that won't be torn apart. Another life that will matter. The wind picked up, carrying the sounds of the city below. Traffic, voices, life happening in all its messy, beautiful complexity. James closed his eyes and could almost hear his brother's voice, carried on that wind. You did good, Jamie. You did real good. I'm not done yet, James said aloud. Not even close. There's still so much work to do. So many people to help. So many lives to save. He opened his eyes and looked at the Houston skyline, a city he'd once conquered with ambition and now served with love. I'm going to spend the rest of my life keeping that promise. Tommy. Every single day. For you. For all the people you loved on those streets. For every person who feels invisible. James turned and walked back inside, where Rosa was waiting with the next day's schedule, where Donnell had 3 families who needed immediate housing, where Sarah had a crisis at the downtown center that required attention. The work was endless. The need was bottomless. But for the first time in his life, James Crawford was exactly where he needed to be, doing exactly what he was meant to do. Building a legacy that mattered. Honoring a brother who'd taught him, even in death, what it meant to truly live. Proving every single day that no one, absolutely no one, is invisible. James Crawford lost everything, his company, his reputation, his brother. But in that loss, he found something far more valuable: purpose, redemption, and the understanding that true wealth isn't measured in dollars, but in lives changed. Tommy's death wasn't the end of his story. It was the beginning of a legacy that would save thousands. Sometimes our greatest pain becomes our most powerful purpose. Sometimes the people we lose teach us how to finally, truly live. What legacy do you want to leave behind? Not in money or fame, but in the lives you touch and the hearts you change? Share your thoughts below, because every single one of you matters, and your story isn't over yet. Thanks for watching till the end. We know you loved this story, and there are many more thrilling ones waiting for you. Just click on the video on your screen to dive into the next chapter.